Welcome, everybody, to DojoTalks sponsorship. In today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about, where does money in chess come from, and when should you take it, when should you not take it? How should different players, streamers, tournament organizers think about and look at sponsorship opportunities for chess? And one of the reasons Kostya selected this topic for us today was that I'd published an open letter about a week ago in which I urged a bunch of chess professionals to please not promote a new chess enterprise called The Immortal Game, because ultimately that website is going to take people's money from them and offer them little in return. It's going to sell them immortal bishops and knights and cracked bishops and knights and platinum bishops and knights and stuff like that. It's going to peddle them some NFTs and then eventually disappear in a pile of sadness. And I think when that day comes, that the players who've promoted the website are going to be responsible for their fans feeling bilked. So I was just urging them to, and I didn't go into any detail on how this was all going to play out, Kostya and Jesse. I just said, look, do a little reflection, maybe research this company a little bit, think about it a little bit. Just because they're offering you money, that's not enough reason to take it. You have a responsibility as a sponsored person or spokesperson. You're being invoked by this company to tell your fans to trust them. So you have a responsibility to vet these companies before you represent them positively to others.
Yeah, so let's just clarify a few things. So yeah, this one was about like a specific company called The Immortal Game that's doing this like chess NFT online thing. They actually wanted us to join their team as well, and they offered us to be one of their influencers. So we'll definitely get into that. But we also just kind of want to talk about broadly, because I guess in the background of all this, it's like there's been this huge crypto exchange, FTX, that recently went bankrupt and lost a ton of people a ton of money. And FTX was like a chess sponsor. They sponsored some of the Play Magnus events, and so presumably a lot of chess people put their money on that exchange because of the partnership or advertisement or whatever. So there's definitely a lot to discuss in terms of like chess and sponsorship and crypto specifically, but also other forms of let's say money that maybe the chess world shouldn't want to be taking. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think also it's a question that's been around for a while. So when you've got FIDE elections, the different sides are often arguing about who's going to be able to bring sponsorship, who's going to be able to grow the chess budget, etc. Right? So, Kirzon brought his own. he was like, I will negotiate good deals with myself to sponsor chess. Right? He brought the money himself. Garry Kasparov brought Intel when he split with FIDE. It was partly to say we need to professionalize how we get sponsors. This is ancient history for people, but just to say that this is, an important question that's been around for decades and will be around for decades, and even now when you see people coming in, you see Peter Heine-Nielsen and Sutovsky and people like that. One of the things they argue about is, should this Russian company be a sponsor or not, given its ties or lack of ties or tenuous ties to the Putin regime, right? And who's going to bring money and who should be in charge of world chess based on what sponsors they will bring. So bringing sponsors can be seen as a real asset and positive for some people. And other people will say, hey, this is the sign that you're corrupt and that you shouldn't be in charge of things.
Yeah. Right. Well, I think, I feel like it's definitely a complicated issue. I'll try to like maybe steelman the side for crypto a little bit, because my feelings on it are definitely mixed. Because I do feel like the chess world has always struggled with money and with sponsorship. It's like the money has often come from very dubious places. You have tournaments that are held in like regimes that have huge like human rights violations, and there are players that sometimes they like protest playing there because they just don't want to travel. The Americans famously skipped out on like the World Rapid and Blitz a couple of years back. It was being held, I think it was like Iran, or I don't remember where exactly, but so I feel like chess is often struggled with sources of money, and a lot of times it just comes from a benefactor who likes chess, and it's like we're just like lucky to have them sponsoring events, and it's been very hard for the chess world to like get actual corporate sponsors. Like every single other sport seems to have like no issue doing, and not to offend all other sports, but like every other sport has like these like huge like sponsors like Nike and like all these companies, and it seems like chess has always kind of struggled with that. So by that token, it's like I totally sympathize taking money from crypto companies, especially like very big companies that have already done like huge deals outside of the chess world with companies that are like much bigger than chess companies. It's like, I don't blame at all people like taking sponsorship from like Coinbase, for instance. I think they were like a world championship sponsor, which I thought was kind of amazing. Is like there was Coinbase written on the back of Magnus's chair, if I remember correctly. I was like, wow, that's that's a pretty big step. So I definitely don't blame the chess world for taking money from crypto, but on the other side, like, I mean, to me, it's so clear like how careful you have to be right now in this industry, because it's like so many companies are just like going bankrupt and people are just losing money. And to promote that without really having like an understanding of the risk is obviously very, very risky. Jesse, you want to jump in with your, or go ahead.
But I just like you to clarify something you said. So you're saying that there is some responsibility if you're promoting something. I mean, if you accept someone as a sponsor, the reason they're sponsoring you is because you're going to promote them. And right. So you accept the basic tenet that you have some responsibility in sort of vetting or choosing that sponsor.
Yeah, and it's not just like crypto that's the issue. Like, there's also an issue with like gambling companies that are like sponsoring chess events. Like Magnus had this like huge gambling sponsorship a while back, and right. I mean, personally, I feel like gambling is also maybe just as dangerous as crypto. They're kind of in the same realm.
That would be another topic if there's a difference between the two, or how similar they are.
Yeah, I'm definitely more pro crypto, but I just recognize that it's like right now. I mean, there's also a ton of scams and stuff, and like during like the .com bubble, right, which I wasn't really cognizant for, but it's like there was a ton of opportunity there, but there was also just like a ton of scams and people losing their money. Mm-hmm. So Jesse, let's get your general temperature on this topic. How are you feeling?
Yeah, so first I just want to add a couple other examples. There was like the breast implant company. That was really another one. And then there's, of course, Russian money, which I think we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we had the famous example of Kirsan Ilyumzhanov, who was the FIDE president, also pumping his own money into it. That was also always tainted and weird. So, right, the history I just wanted to mention those because the history truly goes way back. And I think me and David are on opposite poles of this issue, where chess players, especially chess players who are trying to make a living simply playing. And so I just want to put out the simple economics of it is that if you want to teach, there's a job for you. If you want to create content, there's a job for you. But if you want to play, then it's very difficult. In fact, like let's say you are in the top 10 in the world, you're going to be fine. Once you drop out of the top 10, you're going to be struggling a little bit. And it's hard. And I think that's for a lot of sports, even if sports are more popular, like let's say tennis. I think if you're not in the top 100, you're also going to be teaching or something, right? So all these sports, right, it's only the people at the very top who have some kind of lucrative career. And so from my perspective, I want to say, first of all, that the chess boom has not increased prizes in any dramatical way, at least in what I'm seeing. For example, the tournaments I'm looking at going to, prizes mostly the same, even though numbers are up. Um, and then if you ask yourself, well, who's getting the money? There's kind of these weird events, like there was the Crypto Cup, right? Which before this whole FTX scandal hit, I didn't even know it was called the FTX Crypto Cup. I just knew it was called the Crypto Cup, right? And I think for the players too, they obviously weren't aware of FTX having some kind of problem. They probably didn't even know what FTX was in any big sense. So, from my perspective, if you are a player and you are trying to make it, I think you should basically more or less blindly take the one exception, I guess, and it's weird for me to make an exception on this, but you know, the Russian sources of money are weird. They're hard to, there's not a lot of transparency in it as well. But by the same token, if you imagine, let's say when I was a kid, and let's say I had the opportunity to go play chess in Soviet Russia. Soviet Russia, what a terrible place. But would I have gone if they'd given me a couple rubles just to go play? Yeah, I'm taking that opportunity in a heartbeat, right? So, like, I think players are so poor that it's almost like giving them a hard time for trying to make some money off the playing. It's a really hard ethical ask, because especially if you're like somebody who has a little bit of money and saying, no, but if you want to go play and that's your passion, and that's honestly, as a fan, I'm into them doing it, it's very hard for me to say, don't take the money. Very difficult, and as an example of a different sport, I think, I'm of course watching the World Cup. In my estimation, I'm only interested in two sports events in my entire life: World Cup and the World Chess Championship. Now that Magnus is absconded, I don't care that much about it, at least for this cycle. But in any case, both run by corrupt organizations, incredibly corrupt organizations. But I don't see the players themselves as being corrupted by the process. Like, let's say I'm just using the soccer players, for example. They've worked their whole lives for this, and it's their pinnacle moment. Same way for chess players playing in, let's say, the Crypto Cup, right? You get a chance to play Magnus or something. Great, take it. So in a similar way, using the soccer as an example, right? There's a lot more money, obviously, in soccer, and it's arguably there's a lot more dark money and lack of transparency. But the players themselves, do I see them being corrupted by the process? Not really. Not really. So that's my quick take.
Yeah, I mean, there's two very different situations, right, Jesse? One is a player takes a private sponsorship, and the other is a player plays in an event that's sponsored by somebody else. There, it's the organizer choosing the sponsor, right? So, like FTX, the responsibility, I think we would say, is more on Play Magnus Group and less on Arjun Erigaisi for accepting an invitation to go play in their tournament, right? Like, okay. I think I would probably agree with you. Like, if you're a chess player and you're invited to play in some tournament, you can just go play in the tournament. I don't think you need to look too hard at the tournament structure. But when you're personally taking on, like, let's say Immortal Games is paying Arjun, like, I don't know, maybe $200 a month. Okay. To occasionally tweet something about their site, then it is him personally making that choice. And there, I feel it is on him to make that choice. I guess you would still say, like, whatever, he just needs the money. But I would say in that situation, it's much more at his doorstep.
And let me just say, this is a good example of this. So I'm feeling people listening might have as cloudy of an understanding of this as I do. And this speaks to the potential moral dilemma in somebody like Arjun or somebody else taking them on as a sponsor. So here's the moral dilemma, as I understand it, that they're selling NFTs of maybe chess players and chess pieces and all kinds of stuff in the same model as, I guess, the sports world is trying to do it. And it's like this whole NFT thing, is it really going to make anybody money? Nobody really knows. At least I don't think they do. Is it kind of like crypto in that you're buying something that might eventually have value, might not? Is it a gamble? Yes. So in that sense, somebody like Arjun, if he has as limited of an understanding as I do, I don't see any problem at all. Especially because it's like, gosh, I don't know what they're hoping to make money for, but they're giving me $1. I'll take it, boss. I'll take it. So I don't see, especially that one, because it's just like a murky asset that somebody is trying to sell, and maybe it's going to have value, maybe it won't. But
I think at this point we know that it won't have value. I
Oh,
think
right.
like I'm not an expert on
Uh-huh.
crypto things either, right?
Yeah.
So I'll say that
Yeah.
right away. I don't know the difference between different exchanges and different coins, but I think it's pretty clear that NFTs are worthless. I've never heard anyone claim they had any worth, and I've seen thousands of people discussing them online, and everybody's kind of like, "LOL," this is BS.
Yeah, let me defend NFTs a bit, but I think the same issue is that it's like Jesse asked, like, who's going to make money off of NFTs? I think a few people are going to make a ton of money off of them, and probably a lot of people are going to lose money and have already lost money. Um, so, I mean, with cryptos and NFT, to me, it's just like wild. You have like all these companies like investing in it, investing in the technology, and just pouring like billions and billions of dollars. Like, there clearly has to be something there, but at the moment, it's like so early that there's also going to just be like a lot of just people just taking advantage. They just stamp NFT on their product, and then they just sell it, and then they don't really worry about the long term whatever, or if it actually does anything for the users. And that's definitely why I had no interest in us joining Immortal Game. I don't even know if I like mentioned it to you guys that they wanted to work with us. I just figured y'all would be very much against it, and I was already
No,
kind of like,
you asked me, and to your credit, I said hell no, and that was the end. You just
Yeah, I
okay.
was never even consulted. Give me $1.
Sometimes I like to
$1.
just ask you, like, I have a feeling like, yeah, they're not going to want to go for it. I still want to ask you just in case you're like, no, that's a great idea. We have to do this. Like, I don't know.
What was the offer, by the way? Was it like, I don't know, $200 for a tweet or something? What was
No,
the
I
deal?
don't think there was any. We never got to the point where we were like discussing a monetary amounts, but it definitely very much felt like a thing. Like, yeah, they wanted Dojo to like jump on their site, play some tournaments, maybe like host an arena, promote it, and then they would pay us in some form, cash money, maybe their own kind of like coin or token that they have, that would that maybe later we could essentially cash in. So that's the issue with a lot of these like projects is like they give out 1 million of their tokens or whatever to their influencers, and then those tokens get sold for some amount, and then the value goes way down, and then the people they already sold their shares, and then it's essentially worth very little. So I do feel like there's a future in NFTs, but right now I just feel like people are just trying to make money off this new thing, and it's not really clear what the value is, right? Like you need like a normal person to be able to explain to you like what the value is, like why they're actually buying it, and being able to just resell it at a higher price later is not really value. That's more just like gambling. You're just speculating that the price is going to go up, and it doesn't make sense. So yeah, the company very much just felt like a pay to play thing. It's like you have to eventually pay money to like play chess on their site, and if you play chess really well, then maybe you can like earn money at some point on their site. So it's like a way to like maybe earn stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it just seems like a money grab, and there's a lot of chess people promoting it. I mean, we mentioned like MVL, like Faruja also, and then there's like several like influencers too, and yeah, it's like right. I it seems like right. It's just like not going to work out. I mean, there's been a lot of chess companies that just kind of like sputter out. They usually don't. There haven't been too many NFT companies, but that just seems like, yeah, I just don't see why this one would be so successful. Like, how are they going to get people to start playing on their site as opposed to like chess.com or Lichess? Like yeah, I just don't really see the future there. But in the meantime, right, all these people are getting their fans possibly to now spend money on this site and invest, and yeah, whereas where exactly is the value. So
Okay, so
Yeah, I mean,
so
yeah,
just
you did business school, Costa. You can imagine how they plan to get on there. You've seen like part of their like client facing marketing plan, right? And then as far as the business plan to go with it, make the site free at first, right? And only charge you later on. Um,
yeah, but I just assume most people are just gonna stop playing at that point. Like, I just don't see why people would pay money to like play chess online if it's not like for like a specific like tournament or um,
yeah,
whatever.
I
so
Just to
agree. The
collect
risk on this
trophies,
one
it
is
seems.
less. The risk on this one is less because it's probably not going to be super successful. So people won't get scammed for a ton of money.
But David, just to be clear on what you see as the moral dilemma. So with both crypto and NFTs, it's basically players are helping promote these speculative assets. And
Yeah,
especially because you don't believe in those speculative assets, you think it's
yeah,
morally wrong for them to do so.
right. And if they, for me, my morality is very much based on like intention, Jesse. So if somebody really thinks that this is a great company and they're supporting it,
Mm-hmm.
fine, good for them, right? Like I just asked these players to reflect on it. I didn't guarantee that I'm right, although I am right. But if MVL has like really looked into it and he says, I think this company is going to be great and it's going to provide great value to people, et cetera, and I stand behind the company, fine. I've got nothing against MVL for doing that, right? That's just an honest mistake.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay with me. What I wouldn't like is somebody just saying like $200, yes, and they don't ask any other questions or research anything at all. I think you have a responsibility to vet them.
Yeah,
One of
I would agree with that.
one of the things, David, I find hard about it, about your moral argument, is then when I start imagining all of the different sponsors, like all of them, and anybody with a lot of money, you can debate how they got that money or how they're going to claim to make more money on you by sponsoring you. Or maybe they're just giving it to you in a philanthropic way. But even if they're giving it to you in a philanthropic way and you disagree with whatever politics they have, or maybe how they got the money, you're going to, if you start questioning that, you're going to not only make it difficult for the player then to accept money, but then, oh my God, then the moral quandaries for the player are just innumerable, because then you got to start doing research and stuff, man. And
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to even be playing the game anymore. You're just going to be in an endless loop of like, oh my God, should I take this money? I got all this anxiety about it. When does it ever end?
That
Yeah.
stuff's good for your health, Jesse. I mean, the only way you get better at chess is by practicing chess, right? And the way you get better as a person is by practicing moral thought.
Let me give you an example. So, by the way, Costa is going to move to St. Louis. That's news. Costa will talk about that on his own at some point. But I also spent a lot of time in St. Louis. If you want to argue about money, I think, first of all, I think St. Louis, before the chess boom, St. Louis is the greatest thing that ever happened to the U.S. chess. And if you want to, you can argue both about, like, if you were a communist, you could say, well, that wasn't cool how Rex made his money off using index by creating index funds. And then you could say, not cool that Rex is like into Republican politics. So right away, if you want to start spinning your head about it, then you're going to start either, even if you do accept your invitation to St. Louis, you're still going to be spinning in your head all day long about whether you should have done so.
Which is good for you, Jesse, which is good for your health. That's what
God,
I'm
if you're
telling
a
you.
chess player, you need to be focusing on the chess, my friend. And
No, 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 no. You don't want to be one dimensional. You also have to be a human being as well.
Well,
You have to have relations to other
yeah,
people and communities and thoughts and ideas. I mean, I agree to some extent you need to focus on chess, but I mean, you don't want to be just completely shut off to everything else. And whether or not you make the right decision about playing in a Rex event or what you say about Rex or the Singfield Cup or whatever conclusion you come to, it will be better if you've thought about it a bit before you went forward with it.
okay, so David, here's the interesting question I have for you, buddy. Which sponsorship can you imagine accepting unequivocally?
There is a local pizza place here,
Oh God.
and it's a co-op. It's worker owned,
Yeah.
They produce nice pizza for the community. And if they wanted to sponsor like a local, like the California Unicorns, professional chess team or something like that,
Uh-huh.
oh yeah, that would be awesome. I would be pumped.
Yeah, if they could
I've already
sponsor
thought
us.
about it. I wouldn't have to think about it more.
Yeah, they could send us a couple pieces our way. That would really
Yeah, they could send us some money and we could tell people their pizza's good because their pizza actually is good.
Uh-huh.
If their pizza wasn't good, you know, or if they produced the pizza in some way that tortured their employees, then then I wouldn't do it.
So
But
you want to promote unhealthy food habits to
There
children?
you go. Mm-hmm.
no,
What you're
no, I
saying.
think I think having an occasional pizza is quite fine. I don't think their pizza is particularly unhealthy.
Oh, pizza is very unhealthy, my friend. Pizza
Yeah.
is
Their
one of
pizza's
the
pretty
worst
good.
things you
Definitely a gateway food to unhealthy stuff.
Costa, thank you so much for noticing the obvious problem in David's analogy. Might as well accept a beer company.
But
to
David,
as your sponsor.
Jesse, it's too farther, right? I mean, there's always going to be a spectrum of these things. It's very different to play at a chess club, like whose owner is a Republican, compared to like going out yourself and like wearing a jacket with like some like Russian oil company or whatever, right? I mean, there's certainly different levels of responsibility. And people do bring up that criticism about St. Louis, but I don't know. I mean, it's like I've been there so many times, and the amount of conservative propaganda I've heard while I was there is like zero. I mean, it's not like they're interviewing the players, like, oh yeah, tell us about this new bill the politicians are pushing. Yeah, but with like the crypto companies, I mean, the players are absolutely saying like, yeah, go sign up for this site, start playing. Send them your money. So,
But now, Costa, with St. Louis, I'm totally on board with you. But imagine it this way, just to make it, if you want to problematize it, because I don't see actually a problem with St. Louis, but I feel it's very easy to problematize it. You talk to people from St. Louis, which is a very progressive town, and you realize, oh my God, they hate this guy because that guy is responsible for flipping Missouri to the Republican camp. Also, this guy Hawley, the senator, oh man, he got out the Democratic senator, and this guy's a piece of work, man. This guy's a piece of work. That's all he got. He's full on Trump conservative, weird conspiracy theory and yada yada. And the weirdest thing is, I've hung out with Rex a bunch, and like the
Those
guy
will get to vote against Holly soon.
Rex is a very interesting character personally. I grew up poor in an orphanage, yada yada. In any case, I'm just trying to say, like, I don't think it's hard for me to imagine a sponsor, some kind of, especially sponsorship money that was big, right? It's hard for me to imagine any kind of sponsorship money that's in any way big that is not problematic. And I think honestly, pizza is problematic. Especially if you're going to put a pizza on the back of your coat or something like that, man. That is, like you said, that's a gateway drug, man. You're on your way.
There's a spectrum, and I don't think many people are going to agree with you on the dangers of an occasional pizza. But before that, you had a really good point, Jesse. You shouldn't spoil it with the pizza hate.
No, on the pizza thing, the bigger thing is that it's not a huge sponsor, right? I mean, you could sponsor a team, maybe. But not like
that's the more important point, I think, right? Is that like if you're looking for a sponsor that's going to give you $1 to $2 million for something like a world championship event, then who has $1 or $2 million to spend? Is it possible that somebody has earned $1 or $2 million in an honest and good way? And that's where Jesse has got me. So let's focus on that, because you're right, Jesse. I don't think that like basically anybody has a spare, $1 or $2 million in a good way. So I agree. It would always become problematic for me. Who would be a legitimate title sponsor for FIDE for the World Championship cycle? That would be a tough question for me to answer.
Yeah, it seems like you would need some compromise there. I mean, that's what the chess world has been doing for many years, is compromising. And thankfully, I feel like things have gotten better. and people have been pushing FIDE in a direction to take less dark money and to be a lot more transparent about it. So hopefully, I mean, for many years, like the running, I don't know what to call it, the running joke or tragedy in the chess world was that like no one wanted to work with Kirsan, right? Because he believes that like aliens brought chess to Earth, and he had all these like Kremlin ties and all this stuff. So
And he had journalists murdered, so he was like a scary person.
No, absolutely. And then Kasparov's fiasco with like IBM definitely did not leave a great taste in the corporate world's mouth. So like, yeah, the chess world, as long as I've been a part of it, has always struggled with finding decent sources for money.
And I just want to stress one quick thing, and this is something that baffles me, but it's just got to be said. My favorite sports events are run by the most corrupt organizations. It's fascinating. It's fascinating to me that that's the case. I mean, these are great events. This thing that's going on in Qatar, or however you want to pronounce it, it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. And it was clearly the most corrupt deal behind the scenes. It's like out in the open how corrupt that thing was to give them the World Cup. So, what a great event, though. And I feel similarly about the chess events.
I'm going to try to answer this like almost impossible question. So how to sponsor, the World Championship cycle? Where do you come up with like $2 million that's not, tainted or, do you go to a compromise, or what do you do? So one of the first things I would say is try to split it up a little bit. Again, like if you divide things up, it's a little bit easier. If you try and find 10 sponsors instead of one title sponsor, then the amount of money you need per sponsor is smaller. It's the same as the idea of like, what's like legitimate funding for a Senate campaign, right? Is it 2 billionaires, or is it 1,000 people each chipping in $20? Mm-hmm. So I would say if you split it up and look for smaller amounts from smaller companies that have done less bad things, that's one step in the right direction. And then another thing I think is that you could do some really mild crowdfunding. Like you could sell a ticket to the World Championship online for like $1 or whatever. I mean, it wouldn't have to be very much for people to have the right to watch the games or an official broadcast or something like that. And that way you could make some money, right?
So that's funny. So you see, that's where NFTs could come in, because like with NFTs, you could actually, the idea is that you would certify that someone had like a real ticket, and then they would have that forever.
Do we really need an NFT for it? I mean, you could just buy it like any other ticket, right? Like when you go online and buy a ticket on Ticketmaster, which is more of a monopoly than chess.com, and you buy a ticket for a show for $1 to go listen to some music, you could do the same thing. You could spend like $1 and you've got a ticket to watch the World Championship games. And if the World Championship games want to be broadcast on multiple different websites, right, if they're not going to be like exclusive, then basically you could still find deals to pass that money through the different companies, right? So fans could pay $1 to watch it through chess.com or through Lee Chess or whatever, or through the official site. And either way, you could structure it so that, $1 flows towards the prize fund for the players.
Well, I mean, I think that would be great. Obviously, it's hard to achieve, and people have tried to sell the broadcast, but I don't know if they've ever tried like a $1 thing where it's like super, super cheap and very, very accessible. That does make sense though, and obviously like a recurring stream of revenue for the chess world would be nice. But I mean, there's tons of recurring revenue in the sports world, like in the NFL and the NBA. I mean, they sell at like stadiums and like tons of tickets and sports passes and all this stuff. But there's just so much more of a economy there, like with merchandise and jerseys and but even those sports have like tons of huge sponsors, like all the Nike, Gatorade, and all these companies. I mean, I don't know. I feel like
that's just so players can get paid $100 million instead of $20 million. It's not like without those sponsors, the whole thing wouldn't work, right? It's just that the thing is working so well. Money and success attracts more money and success. So it's just rolling in it at this point, right? With chess, as it would be more successful, you'd have more people interested in sponsoring. But again, you can still be selective about it. But I think creating a system where there's actual income off of spectators and tickets is very, very logical.
Yeah, I would think we would want that. Yeah, just regardless of what we do with the sponsorship question. Desperately we need that. I wanted to go back to David's earlier point about how if you're promoting something, you should really believe in it. Like, to me, I just feel like, that's always been very intuitive. Like, if you have some influence or some marketing power, you really shouldn't be promoting products that you wouldn't just recommend normally, like to a friend or something, or that you personally use. We've only done, as far as I know, the HelloFresh sponsorship here for this channel. Which I had to ask you guys, you were okay with it because it involved food, and you guys know how food is important to me.
But you were the ones who got the avocados, buddy. Me and David never got any of those avocados. You took that all for yourself, my friend.
Well, I did the legwork to set up the sponsorship.
You did the work.
I very much, enjoyed it. We have other deals as well in our inbox. I'll share with you guys. But we've been offered stuff that I was just not interested in and never going to use. And it just doesn't feel right to just promote it. It just seems well, I think that's part of what being a good influencer is all about. If you only promote the stuff that you really believe in, then your fans can actually trust you. Then when you do promote something, that they should really go out and take a look at it, like a really good book or something, or a new course or whatever.
And you tried HelloFresh, Kostya, and I don't know if you liked it or didn't like it, but you were going to give it an honest review, probably, right? Like, if you liked it, you would tell people that it was great, and if you didn't like it, you'd be like, oh well, not going to repeat that.
Yeah. No, I did enjoy it, and back then, my review was basically the same. It was a very good deal that they offered for the first box, and I mentioned I probably wouldn't continue after the first one, and that is what happened, because they give you that very, very good deal, and then it does get pricey. But for many people, if I was making a little bit more, it'd be totally worth it for me.
Right. It's a ratio of your time to the price of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But so you gave it an honest review, and it was something that you liked. Now let's imagine there's a product that you don't like. Like, let's say you don't drink caffeine, and some company wants you to just have a coffee sitting on your desk all the time while you're playing, that you're not even actually going to drink. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, I'd only take it if the money was absolutely stupid. Like, if it was really stupid money, then I'd be like, well, and then I would just be honest about it.
Well, the Red Bull sponsorship is a great example, right? It's essentially caffeine, and that happened. That's an example of weird sponsorship in the chess world too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a big one. I used to drink Red Bull. I don't really do it anymore. But no, I was kind of joking. Yeah, I don't know. I'd feel weird about promoting it, because I don't think energy drinks are healthy and should probably be avoided unless you really know that they're okay. But coffee seems a little bit more benign than some of the other ones.
Right. But if it was something that you're not really into, even if you're not super against it, you wouldn't bother doing the sponsorship.
To be perfectly honest, if it's not a harmful product, then if the money is good enough, I would definitely consider it. Let's say it's like a pen or something, and it's like a very cool pen. I'm not into pens. Maybe other people are. Then I wouldn't feel, if they offer me $100,000 to promote their pen, I'm like, maybe. I don't know. It's a lot of money. But not something like, there have been video games that actually did offer us a lot of money to promote their video game. I don't want to mention it, but people can probably guess. That one just seemed like really not worth it. Like, they're just gonna get other people to it's one of these like pay to play video games where it's like you play for a little bit, it's like very addicting. They're like, then you got to pay money to like progress and advance, and very, very predatory. I imagine a lot of kids get into it. Yeah, that stuff. Yeah, if it seems dangerous, then then it wouldn't be worth it.
Nice.
I'm
happy to hear it, Ghost. Yeah, happy to hear it.
I wasn't perfect. I said I would take some money.
That's fine. You at least you thought about it all. You had some idea. You had some limits. You had some thoughts on the matter. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
One thing that's interesting as a moral thing that's come up for me as a chess player, just listening to this, is it's interesting for me personally, like that I have a strong differentiation if I was a player or if, let's say, our site were going to be taking some money. And I think that's partly due to my memory, my visceral memory of being dirt poor, trying to go to tournaments and trying to make it work, and just being like, any dollar you throw at me, I'm going to take it. Whereas like something that we're doing, right? I don't want to take, there's no need for one thing. And then, totally different. So you could accuse me of hypocrisy, I suppose, in my differentiation of those two.
No, I wouldn't. Because I appreciate what you're saying about poverty. Basically, what is or isn't moral varies on your situation. Mm-hmm. If you're starving, then there's more understanding for your choice to take a dollar than if you're not starving.
Absolutely.
So, like, for example, Jesse, if somebody with no money steals a piece of bread and somebody with a lot of money steals a piece of bread, it's a different story morally.
I suppose, the stealing, I don't equate it with stealing. I don't equate like poor chess players accepting money to steal.
No. Yeah, it's totally different. It's just an example of a random moral situation. A lot of people would say stealing is wrong. It's just like an example, right? Mm-hmm. But I was just trying to say, like, almost any moral situation depends on the situation the person's in, right? So like stealing a loaf of bread may seem like a simple little thing, but you would have a whole gradient or gradation of whether or not it was or wasn't wrong, or how wrong it was.
I think there's also an interesting moral component when I imagine somebody young who's into whatever sport they're into, right? That their life, especially it now, or even 50 years ago, if you wanted to be good at something, your life has to be completely dedicated to it in such a way that you shouldn't actually, I don't feel like those people should be concerning themselves with all these moral questions, like the soccer players as well. Don't think about it, buddy. You have one task. You'll probably retire when you're 35, and then you can think about it. Then you can think about it, boss. But until then, do your thing, and then I will enjoy you as a fan pursuing your craft. And until that point, like all this stuff that's so complicated, and like we've already said, there's no easy answer to accepting any kind of substantial money, right? As for me as a fan, go do your thing, accept the money.
Even you have some limit, Jesse. Even you have some limit. Like, I think if Karyakin played in a tournament now, you wouldn't cheer for him.
I don't know. I mean, like, let's take Karyakin as an example, right?
Yeah.
I think he's in a really weird tribal spot. Like, if you look at Russian society now, they're the pro-Putin warmongering aspect of Russian society is so strong that if you lived in it, it would be very hard to actually avoid being a part of it.
Perhaps.
Plus, Karyakin has his own special weird things going on in his head. So, for example, let's take a different example. Fischer coming back to play, especially after saying some really bizarre things.
Right.
Do I need to not be his fan? No, I could still be his fan.
You could be. I'm just saying. How
would I play an event with him? Yes, of course I would. He can say whatever he wants to a certain level. Like if somebody's a genius but has got like their own personal problems and are saying some weird stuff, like I can get over it,
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird, I don't know, it's a weird. I think to me, where I would have the most problems is with the Russian money personally,
Well,
because I find that
that's why I
so.
brought up the Karyakin example, right? Like,
But Karyakin himself isn't the money. He's just one of
he's
the people.
sponsored by those
He's
companies.
sponsored
So,
by them.
so you could say like he's promoting these things because he actually believes in it, or he's promoting these things because he's getting money from them, or both, right? But he's clearly both sponsored by Russian that's tied directly to Putin, and he's promoting, um, intellectually, shall we say, he's promoting not just those companies, but the whole Russian project of invading Ukraine.
And I think, just to put it in a topical, even more topical example, I feel like Nepo is sponsored by Russian money, but he's not saying a bunch of crazy stuff.
Right.
So that's an interesting little thing there too. And obviously, like Karyakin is very hateful in the things he's saying, but essentially both are sponsored by the same people, as far as I can tell. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a hard one too. That you could spend days making yourself morally impaired by thinking about those things in terms of, do I participate in the event or not?
Right.
Yeah, it kind of comes back. I guess we had this question before when we were like when the Karyakin thing was kind of happening, where like, yeah, how much can you separate the chess player from like their outside persona? Like if someone is just like a terrible person, but they're legit chess player, should they still be like invited to events and all this stuff? And I think the sponsorship stuff kind of plays into that. Like if you're sponsored by all these like warmongering companies, for example, then that could definitely start to bring the game into disrepute as they say. It's a tough question. I'm definitely with Jesse a little bit in terms of like, I sympathize for the player, especially if you're just surrounded by all the propaganda. I can imagine how that happens, and then you just get turned. You just kind of get radicalized. So it's very scary. It's very sad. But I mean, also like, we do have to kind of like protect the chess world a bit against it, because it comes down to, again, it's like, well, where's the limit? Like, what can a player do before before they get booted out of of a chess event, right? It's like how far can they push it in terms of the morality side?
And actually, let me just say something about technology and how this influences. Like, this is just a topical example that pertains to all these people. Is that back in the day, okay, we had chess players saying all kinds of crazy things, but because they weren't saying it on Twitter, they were just saying it to some people around them, and maybe those people told other people what they said, but the egregious things they said never became a topic for discussion in the way they become now. And a really interesting example is like Emery Tate and his son. Okay, so Emery Tate would say amazingly controversial and weird things that if he had had a Twitter platform, he would have probably become famous, but also he would have become banned, right? His son then is in many ways a carbon copy of the guy, and is very controversial. And then my student James Altucher had him on his podcast, and then Altucher was banned by loads of people just because he had him on the podcast.
Right.
And all I'm trying to say is nowadays, people like Karyakin, there's so many other chess players, and they speak their mind. They're going to say some crazy stuff because a lot of them were never educated. They just had chess. So they're going to say, when you don't exposed to the broader culture, and then suddenly you come out of it, you're going to think you're a genius because you're a chess player, but then you're not going to have been exposed to a lot of other ideas or thoughts. And then you're going to, whatever conspiracy theory is out there, you're going to be like, well, that's the truth. And then you're going to say some crazy things, right? And now, especially with Twitter and all these other places where you can express those opinions, people are going to be like, oh, look what the guy said. Look what the guy said. It's totally different from 20 years ago. I just wanted to make that quick remark because that's part of what's going on. Like when we're banning Karyakin, we're not banning him for the money. It goes to our point. We're talking about sponsorship, right? We're not banning him for the money. We're banning for what he said.
Yeah.
Right.
That is what happened. And FIDE specifically said that he was banned as opposed to like Sergei Shipov, who was also kind of very, very pro-war, just because he has a much bigger online influence. That was their own reasoning.
Right. I mean, that was ludicrous reasoning, but yeah,
yeah,
it was the reasoning.
Right. It's like, it was odd. It was odd. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't really know Emery, but yeah, that Andrew Tate case is super interesting because it's like he's like the son of this like legend chess player. It's like so interesting, but yeah, he's radioactive. People really did not like him, or what he's.
And by the way, the story, just from a chess perspective, I want to put out there, is really fascinating for those of us who knew Emery, because Emery, I didn't even know he had kids. And this kid was like off in England doing his thing. And Emery was just going around the world, sleeping with women, going to chess tournaments, and having this very interesting but toxic personality that drew people to him. And then Andrew Tate on this podcast with Altitude is like, oh yeah, when daddy came home, there was a totally different vibe. And he's talking about this vibe that he gets off of Emery and the toxicity, but also in an interesting toxicity kind of way. And it's this amazing chess story, really, because for me, just because Emery was such an interesting character that a lot of people, by the way, a lot of chess players are interested in Emery, want some kind of biography written of him. I would read that biography. It was researched well because it was so much interesting backstory to the guy and what had been going on in his life. That if he had existed in this day and age, like his son, he would have made money off of his presence. Yeah, it's totally. And then in fact, he ends up dying poor and kind of on the streets, at the end. Yeah. Anyways, that's a different story, but wildly related to our digital world now. That's changed how we think about both sponsorship and how people are talking.
Yeah. You could link it up by saying that he should have had a sponsor.
Exactly. He should have had a sponsor. He should have had a sponsor.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we should start wrapping it up then.
Yeah.
You guys have any closing thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, my closing argument is just I would encourage everybody to engage in moral thought, to practice it and advance as people. You don't have to be right every single time. The point of thinking about these things and talking about these things is not always to be right. Just like I tell people when they analyze their game, they don't have to find the right answer. Sometimes like at 1200 is like, it's beyond me. I'm not going to find the answers to like these questions. I'm not good enough. I have to ask the computer or something like that, right? But the process of seeking those answers and thinking about them is useful in and of itself. So you don't have to get every question right. I know I seem very, very strict in my morality, but I'm also very understanding of people. I'm just asking people to try a little bit. I'm just recommending that people try a little bit. I think it's good for them and ultimately good for the world as every person becomes a little bit better, then the society and the community around them is strengthened, multiples of that by every person who's doing that. So I think we should all, engage in some reflection to a reasonable extent. You don't need to spin in circles of paralysis, like Jesse said. And I mean, Jesse is somebody who's got very, very deep thoughts, and he knows that that's possible. And I recognize it is. You can become paralyzed by not being able to figure out any of these things definitively. So I'm just asking, within some reasonable limits, that people reflect on things, and it'll be good for us all. Okay. I rest my case.
And on that note, I would say that it would be good to extend that reflection to the fans as well, because I think people need to realize that the chess world has been poor for a very long time and struggling to make deals and get sponsorship. And so when you see chess players kind of like jumping on the money and like really trying to make as many deals as they can, I feel like, sometimes you're going to make mistakes and they might take money from places that they shouldn't, and they might mess up and they might do things that they end up regretting. But folks have to realize chess is a game that's played on the board, and we might be really good at chess, but that doesn't always extend out to all of their decision making. And so, like the chess world kind of being like popular, it's like very new for us, and we have like all these new opportunities coming in. So yeah, I think people will mess up, and I hope the fans do learn to kind of forgive them and realize that it's really not that easy to know how things are going to work out. Sometimes things go wrong, and I mean, for me, the big litmus test is always like someone makes a mistake, they end up owning up to it. I think that's very big and important to do.
Yes.
But on the other hand, it's good to give people that kind of genuine benefit of the doubt, that they are trying to do the best they can and they're not trying to scam anyone. And there have been chess players, like they get caught up in something and ends up going wrong, and it's like, I can assure you they weren't going into it like, oh yeah, I'm going to scam a bunch of people, right? So I definitely feel like there should be kind of a give and take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, offerings of forgiveness and also offerings of apologies, right? And that's one of the things that I'm waiting for from the Play Magnus group, right? Is for them to make some kind of statement of contrition or responsibility around their sponsorship choice.
Instead of a closing argument, I'll just mention just a closing thought. I just want to say that a lot of these sponsorship deals are pushing online chess more than they are over the board chess. And so one of the interesting trends then is just this move away from over the board chess that hurts me more. It hurts me more personally than the taking of money of players, may potentially.